Well, there's a YouTube channel that I enjoy watching. It's called The Holy Post. It's a podcast format Christian YouTube channel. And one of the hosts on that podcast, Sky Jathani, a pastor and a writer, he has recently released a book called What If Jesus Was Serious About Heaven? Now, on the channel, he does a 40-minute interview with a co-host where he talks about the book. And he also made a short promotional video called 5 Surprising Things the Bible Says About Heaven. He brings out these 5 points, and I wanted to play the video and react to what he says here.
Here are 5 surprising things the Bible says about heaven. Number 1, there's more than one heaven. The word for heaven in both the Old and New Testaments is actually plural. That's right, the biblical writers believed there are many heavens, not just one.
That's a perfectly good point. Now, I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. In our common English translations, when the word heaven is used, it's very often used as a plural. Heavens, the heavens. Now, of course, sometimes it is used as a singular, as like the abode of God, something about, God living in heaven or the kingdom of heaven. But, of course, when we use the word heaven, we're talking about generally the upper realms outside of where we dwell. That can mean the sky itself, space, or the higher dimensions where God and angelic beings exist. So when we read or use the word heaven, whether we use the singular or the plural, we are generally reading and using that word as a plural.
Number 2, there are no mansions in heaven. This idea comes from a bad translation of Jesus' farewell discourse in John 14.
In our current use of the word mansion, that's right. That Jesus was not saying that we're going to have large houses in heaven. No, it's abodes, dwelling places in the house of the Father. There is a place for us to live in the house of the Father through our relationship to Jesus. Now, I'm going to take issue with him saying that it's a bad translation. Now, I have a prejudice towards the King James Version. I like it very much, and I think that it is objectively a good translation. And I'm going to say that they got that translation right for how the English language worked in their time. That word mansion does translate correctly as the monai of the Greek, and other translations from around that time used comparable words in their own languages. Going back to Jerome's Vulgate, he also used a comparable Latin word. That's not to mean a big house, but to mean an abode in the house of the Father, which is what Jesus is telling the disciples. So I don't think it's a case of a bad translation, just that the word has changed meaning over time. I think it was a good translation originally, but we understand the word mansion differently today. And no, Jesus is not promising big houses to believers, but a place, a room in the house of the Father.
In fact, Jesus doesn't say anything at all about heaven in his farewell discourse, and definitely nothing about mansions.
He gets more into this point in his 40-minute interview, which, if you're interested, I have the link below. You can listen to the whole thing. Now, I don't think it's wrong to say that Jesus talks about heaven and going to heaven in his Last Supper discourse, even after listening to Sky's full objection to that point. Jesus talks about where the Father dwells and having a place with the Father for us through him. Now, what we think of as where the Father dwells, in as much as we think of that as heaven, the realms, the realms of existence where the Father is, I don't think it's wrong to say that John 14 does talk about us going to heaven through our belief in Jesus. Now, he makes a lot of great points about how our idea of what heaven is wrong and is often not biblical. So if he's taking objection to what we think of when we think of going to heaven or having a mansion in the house of the Father, then he's probably right. But Jesus's talk does certainly talk about us going to live with the Father. So in as much as living with the Father means living in the place of his existence, living in heaven, I don't think it's wrong to say that Jesus does talk about his believers going to heaven.
Number 3, heaven is not the opposite of hell. Heaven and hell are never juxtaposed anywhere in the Bible. Instead, the Bible talks a lot about heaven and earth.
He's absolutely right there. I'm really glad that he brings up stuff like this. And this is why I like this channel and the people who present on it. They are giving a careful biblical teaching on all kinds of issues. And they really do a lot to, I think, dismantle the misconceptions that Christians have about things and bring us in line more with a original teaching of Jesus and the apostles. And it opens up the question about what is hell. That is another topic that the Christian world has a lot of non-biblical ideas about, and we have a lot of Christian mythology about both heaven and hell that simply don't come from the Bible.
Number 4, no one will spend eternity in heaven. The Bible never says the faithful will live forever in heaven. Instead, it says that God will dwell forever with his people on earth.
I think it's very important to realize the importance of earth as our place of living, and that, yes, like he says, God is going to live on earth with people in the sense that earth will become a part of heaven. So actually, when we talk about living forever in heaven, when people talk about that, it's kind of a yes and no, in that we're not going to live in some non-earthly place forever, but we will live in heaven forever, in as much as we will live with God forever. That is the destiny of the human race. It is to be both in our known physical universe, but also in the realms of existence where God is. There's not going to be a divide forever. You know, that divide will be crossed. So we could say we're going to live in heaven forever, but it's not going to be some unrecognizable spiritual existence in a far away and far off in time place.
And number 5, the gospel is not how you go to heaven when you die. The apostles preached 8 gospel sermons in the book of Acts, and not one mentions going to heaven when you die.
The gospel, the good news. No, it's not the good news of how to go to heaven when you die. Oh man, this is why I really like what these guys are doing, teaching a sound Bible-based doctrine. The gospel is the message of Jesus's lordship. You know, you probably had a moment, kind of like what I'm going to explain here, like where you kind of know something, but you don't know exactly how to express it until someone comes along and gives you those words. That happened to me recently, where someone told me, said, you know, when we talk about the gospel being good news, that good news is that Jesus is the King. That is the good news that is being spread and preached. And that was the explanation that I've been looking for some time, wondering, you know, how do we accurately describe what the gospel is? Because no, it's not about afterlife. The afterlife is not the purpose of the gospel. It is not the message of the gospel. Or like Sky is saying here, the gospel is not about how to go to heaven when we die. And that is not what the disciples preached or what Jesus preached. It was not about how to have a good result in the afterlife. It's about accepting the lordship of Jesus, accepting his resurrection from the dead, and accepting and obeying his commandments, accepting that he has a kingdom that he is setting up on earth, and we need to be a part of it. Not so that we can go to heaven when we die, though I do think that does happen, but because we love God, we love his kingdom, and we love Jesus and what he is doing.
That makes you wonder, if heaven wasn't the goal of their gospel, why is it so central to ours?
I wonder that same thing every day. It seems like Christians focus on everything but the teachings of Jesus. Like we make Christianity about every other thing. I talked about this in my bit on the desire of Christians to bring back the Ten Commandments. It's like we just find everything that isn't the gospel and then make Christianity about that other thing. Why do Christians make Christianity about bodily purity, about keeping the Ten Commandments, about afterlife, about punishing sinners? I mean, it's like everything and anything but what Jesus and the apostles teach. Why? Honest question. Why? I don't know.
If these 5 things have piqued your interest, then you can learn a lot more by reading my new book, What If Jesus Was Serious About Heaven?
And once again, I really like what these guys are doing. I enjoy listening to a lot on their channel, and I think I'll make some more videos kind of reacting to and commenting about the things they cover. And I really appreciate conservative Christians, fundamentalist Christians who are really making an effort to bring out the truths talked about in the Bible and rolling back the cultural and political add-ons that have become so prevalent in Christianity, getting things back to the basics of Jesus' teachings. I just love what these guys are doing, and I recommend them highly. Well, thanks for watching. Please leave some comments below. Let me know what you think about what Sky talks about here. Let me know what you think about my own comments on this, and tell me what do you think about heaven? What are some important things that we need to realize and understand about heaven? What are some things that we should know more about heaven so that we have the right idea when we think about it ourselves and when we talk to others about it? Bye for now.